From the town's budget to critical infrastructure needs, those are some of the issues that Summerville Mayor Russ Touchberry is tackling. I talk one-on-one with the mayor for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Summerville Mayor Russ Touchberry, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me, Quintin. Happy to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, we were just talking about it off camera, but this particular region is just now getting out of the whole snow ice event here in the low country. And I know I was just telling you that here on the peninsula, there were a lot of, slick roads and slick streets, and still are to this moment. I'm sitting next to a couple of ice and stuff here right now. As we sit here right now, Mayor, tell me, what is the state of Summerville after the snow and ice event?
Well, praise the Lord, we had some warmer temperatures over the last couple days, so that our travelways, our sidewalks, and our streets are, for the most part, clear of any frozen hazards. Praise the Lord. However, I will say during the thick of it, our roads were pretty bad in some of the shaded areas, and it just kept getting cold overnight. So it was refreezing and there was black ice. We had several accidents. Thankfully, many of them were not bad injuries or, very bad accidents. So our folks ended up safe. Our public safety folks who were working those accidents all ended up safe. And, I hate to say it, but it was fun while it lasted, but I'm glad it's gone.
A lot of people would actually agree with you on that. I know, Mayor, that obviously a couple of weeks ago, prior to this particular event, you all were actually in your budget retreat. So do you want to create some sort of capital fund so that in the future you'll have resources for that, financially speaking?
You are preaching my language, sir. Yes, we, for the first time since I've been on council and for the first time in my recollection, are at a state where our council and our finances are in a place where we can start to have set aside capital planning and funds. So we're not reacting each year during our budget cycle, but we're actually being proactive and planning ahead for future capital expenditures. Some of those could be the larger equipment purchases that are needed. Some of them could be our facility upgrades. You can project when you're going to need a new roof on a facility. You can project when you need a new fire truck. And all of those things can be plugged in. And if we start planning ahead and getting a very solid capital plan, we won't be reactionary and we won't put ourselves in financial hardship when a lot of things stack up on the same year. We can actually spread them out, plan them accordingly, and know that we need to be preparing for some of those major capital expenses. Not to mention, the cost of infrastructure is substantial. And if we have infrastructure projects that we're going to plug in, we need to be planning for those.
So in total, how much money do you need for those capital expenses?
Tens of millions of dollars in total. However, we don't have the forecasted plan laid out in front of us yet. Okay. So we don't know when we need and how much we need for each year. We're going to be going into a meeting in February, a workshop setting again. You may have heard that we were going to start setting priorities. We heard from all of our department heads on what their requests were. And the February 19th is when we're going to have this meeting. And we're going to be discussing how to prioritize those items because some things just can't be done this year. But as we prioritize them, as we look to future years, this is going to be the backbone of our future capital planning document, which is I'm excited for. I think that's what we need to be doing is looking forward and planning accordingly.
And that Wednesday, February 19th is coming up very soon. So yes. I know that obviously, Mayor, there's some projects that obviously were requested from some of the staff members that you really can't fit into the budget this year. So what's actually on your priority list right now?
Me personally, we have several items like, police car replacements and the basic items that need to be taken care of year in and year out. Those are certainly some of my top priorities. We know that if we don't deal with certain things this year, we're going to have to deal with twice as many next year. And so those are the items that I want to make sure that we have addressed and we are covered in this budget. And then for items that might be larger and a higher dollar figure, I want us to start factoring in how much it's going to cost us next year and the following year to plan ahead for those items and get that kind of structured into our planning process. But for me, the reoccurring items that are somewhat larger, vehicle replacements and those types of things. If you did listen in to our budget retreat, you would have heard Chief actually talk about whether or not it would be smart to utilize kind of a fleet leasing program that's implemented on a phased basis. That could be something that frees up some additional money in using a new strategy for our fleet management. Those are things that could be prioritized as well, something that helps us kind of shift how we're managing our assets. So a lot to come, a lot more information needed from my standpoint to be able to say what my priorities are. But tackling the expenses we know we have to face each year, I want to cover those for sure. I don't want to kick the can down the road on any item.
And so, with that potential fleet leasing program, Mayor, I know this is a silly question, but would it be local or regional or national?
That's a great question because the program he mentioned was the enterprise program.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that that's administered on a local level through the local enterprise group. However, I see them as a national entity. And, for something like a fleet, maybe that's the best way to do business as we go through the decision making process on whether or not that is what's best for Summerville. We're going to have to ask some tough questions and make sure that we're doing something that's been proven elsewhere as successful. We don't want to recreate the wheel here and find out all the problems, right?
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. And for that leasing program, I know I'm going ahead of myself, but how long do you expect that? Well, the town of Somerville to be involved with that contractually wise?
That's a good, thinking about what Chief presented, and I don't have the notes in front
Sure.
of me, but it seemed like it was a phased in program over several years,
Okay.
and that there are values in the vehicles that we would have, and we would have the opportunity to kind of buy ourselves back out of the lease if we deemed it not what's best for the town or we thought the service was poor. So it gives us kind of a buyout option. So we're not going to be what I would call married to it if it doesn't serve us well, but we can slowly implement it and see if it does work well. If it does work well and it reduces the cost of doing business, that's a fantastic win-win for the community.
And so when this program eventually gets off the ground, where exactly do you need most of that police fleet? What areas need more police coverage, for lack of a better word?
Well, that's a great question because the town of Somerville has a very large footprint and it's highly irregular boundaries. And we have to make sure we're responsive to every corner of our community. Chief would have to figure out exactly where those resources were needed most, and how to process in those items. I'm sure our town administrator will help kind of check in on his process. I would not want to be in the middle of making the decision on who got what and where it went, because I think politicians being involved in those day-to-day management decisions can be very dangerous.
And speaking of which, I know you've said to Channel 2 that the financial director, Rhonda Moore, has indicated that the town is anticipating a good surplus this year, that is. She also said that the town had a $4.5 million surplus at the end of the fiscal year last June 30th. So let me ask you, Mayor, how exactly, well, is this particular current surplus temporary or is it structural?
So it's interesting for several things. Number one, the surplus is a surplus from the budget standpoint, from a revenue standpoint. However, we had planned on taking $2 million out of the general fund. So, really, what the surplus amounts to is $2.5 million of surplus because we were planning on pulling revenue from the general fund in our spending plan, which is a way that she padded it to be conservative. Now, we also received over the course of that time ARPA funds, kind of the last tranche of ARPA funds, which came from, that's basically COVID money from the federal government. And so we spent that last bit during that time and sold some property. So when we talk about a windfall, I love that our community, our business community is thriving and growing. The health of and vibrancy of our community is growing, and that's creating more revenue than what we projected. But we don't want to be overconfident in the fact that, some of our wins are one-time money, one-time sales, one-time money. And we had already kind of, so, but as we look forward, I believe this new capacity in our budget, we don't need to grow everything at the rate of the growth of the town. We need to grow only what's needed to meet the services of our community. And then the delta, that extra, can go ahead and start being placed in this capital fund so we can plan for the future and invest in the capital needs that we know we have.
Okay, going back to those properties, Mayor, how many properties did the town of Summerville actually sold?
I don't know the total number over the course of last year. I know we have several properties that over the course of the last 3 years we've listed and we're working to sell. We've sold a couple. I think we sold one during that fiscal year of pretty solid magnitude. And this past fiscal year, we have sold at least one that has a pretty good magnitude. And by that, I mean over $500,000 of a piece of property. So pretty big contributor into the budget.
And so, how much money did you all have to glean from those revenues from, I guess, for the general fund?
From the general fund? Well,
Yes.
the good thing is we have a healthy fund balance policy and we have an emergency fund policy set in place to kind of protect the town, which is good. Based on that, I would redirect the majority of anything in excess of those towards our capital fund personally. Now, council would have to agree with that, of course. I'm just one vote of 7.
Yeah.
But I think that's what a prudent group would do. Make sure we have the funds in the general fund that we need to meet our fund balance policy, our emergency preparation policy, and then start to think of where we need to put money into a capital fund.
That emergency preparation, Mayor. So when you all do get that money for, say, God forbid, another snow event, will that go into the emergency preparation fund?
So that fund helps us recover, recover from these storm events. Not every event, as you know, do we get FEMA reimbursement or even state reimbursement.
Right.
We hope from the snowstorm recently we'll get state reimbursement since it was a state declared emergency declaration,
right,
is what I believe you would designate it as. So I think we have access to gain hopefully recover some of those funds from the state. But if not, they would come from our disaster recovery, and we'll have to fill that back up with any money that we get elsewhere.
Now, and with those properties that you all have to continue, you still want to sell, will those funds go into the capital fund or will it go into the general fund?
That's a great question because we haven't decided that yet. That is something that may be a part of our capital fund policy. When we do sell assets, we'll designate where they go, whether they go maybe earmarked to a department head or to a department based on where the funds came from. If they sold a large piece of equipment for some money, maybe it goes to that department in the capital fund, or maybe it goes just generally in the capital fund. And that's a great question and something that council is going to have to decide as we develop this policy moving forward.
And with the COVID funds, Mayor, do you all have any money left over from that?
Left in excess of what?
Oh, the COVID funds are the
the COVID? No,
right.
All of those have been designated. As a matter of fact, we
Yes,
went
sir.
through an exercise because they all have a timeline on them.
Mm.
And so what we did to make sure that all of the funds were designated so that we could not have to pay any of them back, uh, any remaining funds from whatever didn't get fully funded, when you assign, say, $100,000 for some pickup truck or piece of equipment, for an example, and say that's going to come from ARPA funds. Well, if it costs $95,000, now you have $5,000 that's hanging out there. Any of those type of remainders, what we're going to use those ARPA fund remainders for, we have assigned that to go against our insurance increases, which are substantial. So all of the ARPA funds will be expended this year. They're all assigned. And if there are any remainders, they're going to go against our insurance increases to help us pay for those.
And can you give me, well, as far as compare and contrast with those insurance increasements, where do you see that as far as a difference from a couple of years ago?
And I don't have a real good feel. I'm not in the insurance industry, but from what, I've seen and what I've been told, the insurance increases seem to be moving at a faster rate than everything else is. So somewhat to like how the cost of construction moved up rapidly over a short period of time, it seems like the insurance industry's premiums are going up rapidly at this point in time as well, and have been for a little bit.
As a little bit, oh, you know what? Speaking of which, let me talk to you about the Cedar Street extension. I know the town administrator said a new cost estimate was received recently, and the cost extension, I believe, is 10 million, which is more than the 5.5 million estimated before. And I know that you told Channel 2, quote, "I'm not sure which entity we have two cost estimates. One was from Dorchester County and one was from our engineer on the record." You said that you didn't know which one was the 10 million and which one was the 5.5 million. You do say that obviously there's some discrepancies and you want to make sure that you nail it down so that you can get those costs out of the way. So I wanted to ask you this: when it comes to that, first and foremost, let me ask you, does the estimates align with the architectural and engineering plans for this particular project?
So in that case, we were presented during the budget retreat with two numbers of the current cost estimate. One being a little over 5 million, which was what we originally conceptualized the cost at. The other being over 10 million. Our engineer of record provided one of those. I think Dorchester County, doing an independent estimate, provided one of those. Either way, the project is a good project. It is moving forward. And I'm thankful that Dorchester County and Berkeley County included this project on their sales tax referendums. So this project is being funded by both Berkeley County and Dorchester County. The majority of the road is in Berkeley County, so we've been discussing with Berkeley County whether they would like to take over the management of this project, just because they're going to have the largest expenditure from their transportation sales tax. So we've been in discussions with them. The cost estimates will be verified through our engineering departments. The current status of the project is right-of-way acquisition. So they're collecting, they are working on acquiring the right-of-way necessary for the project while the project is being permitted. So the project is under permitting as well. When all of that is said and done, the project will be ready for construction bids. And that is when we'll really know what it's going to cost. And it depends on how long it is from today, is how much it's going to cost. I'm just thankful for Berkeley County's willingness to maybe consider taking over the management of that. And they, them and Dorchester County have been so helpful to us.
Yes, I'm probably going ahead of myself, Mayor. But in what way does the estimates cover all construction materials, labor costs, equipment, and maybe subcontractor costs?
So it is supposed to cover all of those costs. Those should be the full cost to complete. However, We know if the project is delayed in any shape or form, that costs typically go up. So my hope is we can rapidly get this project up and ready for bidding and get it out on the street, and then we know what the real cost will be. Anything before that is kind of, even though it's an educated guess, it is somewhat speculation until we get it bid and we get the actual numbers in. At any point in time, if those bids come in and we don't feel that they are fair, or we don't find them to be in line with our estimate, we don't have to award the project. We can do some things in-house and then send it back out to bid at a later date.
So, what things can you ideally do in house?
Well, in-house, all we would do is make adjustments to what we think costs the most. You can provide owner furnished materials if it makes sense, but in a project of this scale, I don't believe that would make sense. I think we would have to maybe research what the contractors saw that we didn't see. Typically, if prices are out of line, owners missed maybe a risk factor or something that was very complex. And we'd work with our engineer to maybe shore that up and improve those areas. But I think this is a straightforward project. I think things will come in line, and we have contractors who are ready to get work done around here, so that's a good thing.
And you talked obviously about those cost estimates. So, will those estimates be consistent with the project schedule and timeline?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. That's not never guaranteed. If you put too small of a timeline on a project, the cost goes up.
Yeah.
So, the schedule that we allow for the project does have a factor on the cost of a project. So we have to make sure that it's something that is in line with the industry standard.
Hmm. And what standards are you guys currently looking at?
Well, all of our projects and projects like these typically reference SCDOT specifications.
Right.
Of course, our transportation sales tax projects have all kind of had a commitment to the complete streets model, making sure that our bicyclists and pedestrians are all considered in corridors where transit is. Future transit as well needs to be considered. So making sure all modes are done, but from our standpoint, SCDOT standards typically, I shouldn't say rule, but are the standard of care for most of these types of transportation infrastructure projects.
Speaking of which, Central Avenue, how many sidewalks, Mayor, have actually been added to that particular avenue?
So, Central Avenue, I'm really excited because a project that had been put on the shelf, and even though it was designed and permitted, folks just weren't funding it. We found a way as a council to get that project moving, and it bid last year. And guess what? Construction started, I think, this week on it, or it's Monday, today on it. It was supposed to maybe start last week, but with the snow and ice, I don't think they did much.
Right.
But it's starting this week, and it's taking a large cross section over a mile from Parsons Road on Central Avenue, a sidewalk on one side of the road, all the way to West Carolina to tie into an existing sidewalk that can take you into our downtown. And I really like the opportunity to have more residents and more community members to have access to this. And to further get the excitement up, so the Nexton Parkway interchange,
Yes.
when it was put in, it has a multi-use path that connects Nexton Parkway all the way up to where Cane Bay is. So there's a path there. And our North Maple Street project coming into town from there, it has a pathway and pedestrian connectivity that comes all the way to Parsons. Well, Parsons is going to be improved by Dorchester County's sales tax program, and it's going to have a path that connects to our sidewalk so people can connect from downtown Summerville all the way across the Cane Bay on a sidewalk and be safe. That's exciting. Isn't that neat?
Yes, sir.
That's
Absolutely.
connectivity, and we need more of that in the community. So looking for ways to tie meaningful projects together like that and tie centers where people want to be so that everybody on any mode of transportation can get there, that's exciting. So anyway, I like that.
And so with these new sidewalks tying into that existing sidewalk, as you mentioned, how much is that actually? Is that part of the cost, or that is this something totally separate?
No, it's separate projects that all came together and each one considered having it in there and included pedestrian connectivity. And because of that thought process, now you have a tied in network from multiple different projects being put in together, considering pedestrian connectivity. So it's really just the benefit. Our project is just one piece of many pieces that tie everybody together.
So, how many more capital projects do you want to have in the town of Somerville to make that, particular project that you just mentioned a reality?
So that project is moving forward. The additional pieces, I'm thankful for our county partners, Dorchester County, their transportation sales tax is going to connect that Parsons connection.
Right.
Excuse me. Some of that cold weather catching up with me.
Yeah.
And then, they have another project that's going to tie the Knightsville area
Yes.
and widen Central Avenue from Parsons all the way out to Orangeburg Road. So even more people are going to be added to this connected network over the years to come.
So okay. I live in North Charleston, right near, well, right down the street from Somerville. But let me ask you, how do you make connectivity better there?
On that side of Somerville, Dorchester Road is kind of one of those corridors that kind of is controlled by other entities other than the town of Somerville. We support the improvements that are being discussed by, Dorchester County Transportation Sales Tax to connect, and widen and improve Dorchester Road. I think if not to Ashley Phosphate, from Oak Brook to Ashley Phosphate, maybe even extending all the way to the county line. But all of those improvements will have the bicycle and pedestrian connectivity component. And that pulls people right into where the Sawmill Branch Trail is. That path is being extended to Oak Brook, Dorchester Road near the Ashley River, and all the way to the end where 17A is, has a pedestrian network. And so does Bacon's Bridge Road. So it ties you in to the new county library on Bacon's Bridge Road, the new county park off Bacon's Bridge, and it's all walkable.
Wow. And I skipped over it a little bit, but I want to go back to it. But when you talk about Knightsville, how long do you foresee this particular project happening?
That's a great question. It's in its preliminary design phase. So it has a long way to go. They're doing some of the, initial surveying, preliminary utility identification, and coming up with concept plans to look at, what is the best way to move traffic from these locations through Knightsville back to Parsons on Central Avenue. So those improvements will come, but it's a matter of how long. You still have to have the public involvement process.
Oh, yes.
Then you'll need to do your preliminary engineering and environmental documents. And then once you have kind of a set of plans, you can go start purchasing right of way and submit for your permitting. Then you can do your final design, and permitting takes time. Right of way acquisition takes time. And then hopefully by the end of all of that, you have a final set of plans ready to go out to bid. And our folks need it sooner rather than later, and Dorchester County is working hard on it.
And two more questions for you, Mayor. I know you have to run, but let me ask you. So, what will be the environmental impacts for that?
That'll be determined by the studies. A lot of the environmental impact, from my standpoint, I'm not aware of a lot of wetlands along the Central Avenue corridor. The environmental impacts will probably come more in the human impact, that it takes a toll on those who are facing there. And all that has to be evaluated through the process. And anybody who needs to be relocated would have to be relocated as a part of the project. Hopefully, there won't be too many people displaced as a part of that project.
And how soon will the designing process take place?
So, that depends a lot on public involvement and permitting and anything that may be unforeseen from a utility standpoint. All of those factors factor into how long it takes to design a project and thoroughly coordinate it. In a dreamland, you could say 18 months.
Yes, sir.
In reality, you would say 3+ years.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know you have to run, so thank you so much for your time. Summerville Mayor Russ Touchberry, thank you for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me, Quintin. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.